They were built from the mountain down. Company houses on the ridge, company stores on the hollow road, company schools for the children, and company churches for the dead. For 3 generations, coal was not just the economy. It was the architecture of daily life, the reason the town had a name. Then the board minutes changed, the capital moved, and the communities were left to absorb costs they had never been consulted about. Unemployment soared. Populations collapsed. The shift whistle fell silent and was never replaced by anything. 9 towns, 1 industry, no plan for when it ended. In 9th place, Jenkins, Kentucky stands as a coal town, engineered for permanence and abandoned without a plan. At its peak in the 1950s, Consolidation Coal Company employed nearly 3,000 men in the seams beneath Letcher County, their labor feeding power plants and steel furnaces across the eastern seaboard. The company raised the town from the mountain down, building houses, roads, a hospital, and a school system in service of the mine, not the men who worked it. For 3 generations, the rhythms of Jenkins were the rhythms of coal, the shift whistle before dawn, the blackened faces on Main Street at dusk, the commissary shelves that determined what every family ate and wore and owed. Then the mathematics changed. As surface mining mechanized the workforce and underground productivity fell, consolidation coal began withdrawing in stages through the 1980s, each round of layoffs arriving without a transition plan and without warning. By 1989, the last deep mine had closed. Unemployment in Letcher County surged to 28%, nearly 4 times the national rate. Shops shuttered, schools emptied, and the young left in the first wave while the middle-aged followed, searching for work that no longer existed in the hollow. The population of Jenkins fell from over 4,000 in 1960 to fewer than 2,000 by 2020. A heritage museum opened in 2015, employing 3 paid staff, a pale shadow of an economy that once anchored every street and every morning in Letcher County. Jenkins was built for coal. When coal left, no rescue plan arrived. None had ever been written. 8th place belongs to Dante, Virginia, where the collapse of a company town was measured not only in lost wages, but in the physical repossession of an entire built world. Dante was constructed in the early 20th century by Clinchfield Coal as a model operation in Russell County. Every house on every street was owned by the company, every storefront leased from the company, and even the church deeds were held in the corporate name. At its height, over 2,500 miners and their families filled the narrow hollow, their lives governed by the shift schedule and the company calendar. The baseball league ran on company time. The movie house screened films 3 nights a week. When Clinchfield Coal withdrew mining operations across the 1980s, the infrastructure was liquidated alongside the jobs. Company houses were sold at distressed prices or simply boarded. The store closed. The movie house was razed. On the 31st of March, 1986, the final operations ceased, and more than 1,400 workers were removed from the payroll in a single day. County unemployment filings for Russell County recorded a rate of 24% by 1992. Shops shuttered, families fractured, and the hollow road that had carried shift workers to the portal now carried moving trucks out. By 2000, Dante's population had fallen by more than half, to under 700 people in a hollow that had once drawn families from 3 surrounding counties. The road in from the highway is lined today with vacant lots where company houses stood, their concrete foundations still visible in the grass. A single Dollar General serves what remains of a commercial district that once held 30 independent businesses. For the people of Dante, the closure was not just an economic blow. It was the physical dismantling of an entire world returned to the company that had always owned it. In 7th place, Benham, Kentucky tells the story of a community built with exceptional care and abandoned with equal deliberation, and the long, grinding silence that settled over the hollow in all the decades that followed. International Harvester constructed Benham in 1911 in Harlan County to a standard neighboring hollows would not see for decades, with paved roads, indoor plumbing, and a commissary stocked with goods unavailable within 30 miles. At its peak in the 1940s, over 1,500 men descended into the seams each morning, the shift whistle audible from every porch on every company street. International Harvester sold its coal operations in 1962. For 2 more decades, the hollow ran on borrowed time, the new owners promising continuity while the coal seams thinned. The mine changed hands twice before the final closure arrived in the early 1980s, ending more than 70 years of continuous extraction from beneath the mountain. On the last day of operation, the headframe went quiet, the lamp house locked, and 900 remaining jobs vanished from a county with no secondary employer of any scale. County unemployment data for Harlan County recorded 31% unemployment in 1984, the highest in Kentucky that year and among the highest in the nation. Schools shrank, storefronts darkened, and the population of Benham fell from nearly 3,000 in 1950 to under 500 by 2010, hollowed out as each generation of workers slipped away without a generation behind them to fill the gap. The commissary building stands today as the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum, employing 11 full-time staff and drawing roughly 15,000 visitors each year, a faint echo of the economy it replaced. Benham was built with more ambition and deliberate care than most company towns ever received. It was left with exactly the same coal deficiency. In 6th place, Grundy, Virginia stands as a town displaced twice, once by the collapse of coal and once by the government program designed to replace it. At its peak in the 1960s, Grundy served as the commercial heart of Buchanan County. Its main street was crowded with shops and banks, fed by the wages of nearly 4,000 miners working the seams in the surrounding hollows. Coal royalties funded the schools, the county roads, and a civic life that felt, for one brief generation, genuinely prosperous. But as underground mining mechanized through the 1970s, and surface operations required fewer hands with each passing year, employment in Buchanan County's coal sector fell steadily, and then sharply. By the early 1990s, county unemployment had climbed to 18%. Storefronts were closing one by one, and the tax base that had held the county together was dissolving alongside the payrolls. The state and federal response did not come as diversified employment or retraining on a meaningful scale, but in concrete measures. A flood control and road widening project physically relocated much of downtown Grundy between 1998 and 2012, demolishing historic buildings and displacing businesses, while promising that new infrastructure would finally attract outside investment. It did not. The relocated commercial district drew fewer businesses than it displaced. The Appalachian School of Law opened nearby and employs several hundred people. Yet Buchanan County's population has fallen from over 37,000 in 1980 to under 22,000 by 2020, a decline that no road project interrupted and no infrastructure announcement reversed. The young left for Roanoke, for Charlotte, for wherever work was waiting. Grundy was moved at enormous public expense to the same destination it had already been headed. The asphalt was new, The abandonment was not. Fifth place, Gary, West Virginia, is a town where reinvention arrived on schedule and still was not enough. At its height in the 1940s, U.S. Steel employed over 3,000 miners in McDowell County's Gary district, the camps running 3 shifts, the company scrip system governing where every family spent its wages and what it was permitted to buy. When U.S. Steel withdrew in stages between the 1960s and the early 1980s, the bottom fell out of a county that had built no secondary employer of any significance. By 1990, McDowell County's unemployment rate had reached 23%. Shops closed, schools consolidated, and the population of the Gary district collapsed from over 10,000 in 1950 to under 800 by 2020, as each generation left, and the one behind it did not stay to fill the gap. In the 2010s, state tourism officials promoted the Hatfield-McCoy Trail system, hundreds of miles of ATV tracks cut through former mining land, as an economic engine capable of reviving southern West Virginia. Gary was positioned as a gateway community for the new outdoor economy. By 2022, trail system visitor data attributed fewer than 180 full-time equivalent jobs to trail-related activity across the entirety of McDowell County. The hollow, where 3,000 miners once lined up for the early morning shift, now hosts a trailhead, a small outfitter, and a seasonal food truck open on weekends between April and October. The trail is real. The employment is seasonal at best and incidental at worst. It is a pale shadow of the economy it was meant to replace, offered to a community that had been waiting 2 decades for something more substantial to arrive. In fourth place, Williamson, West Virginia, once the self-proclaimed capital of the billion-dollar Tug River coal fields, stands as the clearest evidence that Appalachian deindustrialization was never purely an economic event. At its peak, Mingo County's mines employed over 12,000 workers, and Williamson's commercial district served a trading area stretching across 2 states. Its storefronts and warehouses built on the assumption that the seams beneath the mountains would run forever. The closures came in waves, smaller operations through the 1970s, major employers through the 1980s and into the 1990s, until Mingo County's total mining workforce had fallen below 1,500 by the decade's end. County unemployment reached 22% by 2000. Shops shuttered, schools emptied, and a generation was left with nothing where a payroll had once been. Beginning in the late 1990s, OxyContin distribution in Mingo County reached volumes that county lawsuit filings named in precise, damning terms. More than 11 million opioid pills shipped into a county of 25,000 people over a single decade. Purdue Pharma's distribution records, subpoenaed in West Virginia's state litigation, confirmed the mechanism without ambiguity. Congressional testimony from 2018 recorded Mingo County's overdose death rate at nearly 3 times the national average. A workforce stripped of purpose and income was flooded with prescription narcotics at its moment of maximum vulnerability. Overdose deaths in Mingo County in the decade that followed exceeded the toll of any single mining disaster in the county's recorded history. The coal companies left. The pharmaceutical companies arrived. For the people of Williamson, the distinction between those 2 facts offered no comfort and no relief. In third place, Harlan County, Kentucky does not arrive in this countdown as a single closure or a single betrayal. It arrives as the conclusion of a century-long argument between a region and the industry that consumed it. Coal came to Harlan County before the First World War and never left cleanly. It took wages first, then bodies, then generations, before finally taking the payroll itself. The 1974 Brookside strike, documented in federal labor filings and congressional testimony, exposed the conditions under which Harlan County miners worked and the lengths to which coal operators would go to preserve them, including private security, blacklists, and wages that kept entire communities permanently indebted to the company store. 45 years later, on the 1st of July 2019, Black Jewel LLC filed for bankruptcy without warning and without payroll. Miners who had reported for their shift that morning were turned away at the gate. Their final paychecks had already bounced. Back wages, in some cases thousands of dollars per man, vanished into bankruptcy proceedings that ranked secured creditors above the workers whose labor had produced the value in the first place. The miners blocked the railroad tracks. They sat in the summer heat for weeks, stopping Black Jewel's coal trains from moving inventory until any sale proceeds could be redirected toward what they were owed. Congressional delegations arrived, held press events, and returned to Washington. Nothing was settled. By 2020, Harlan County's population had fallen to under 26,000, down from over 75,000 at its mid-century peak, a loss of more than 2/3 of the county's people across 7 decades of extraction and managed departure. For the men who sat on those tracks in the summer heat, the century between Brookside and Black Jewel had changed almost nothing about the fundamental terms on which their labor was valued. The debt was never paid. No one answered for it. In second place, McDowell County, West Virginia, carries a weight that employment statistics alone cannot fully hold. Once the wealthiest county in West Virginia per capita, its seams drew migration from across the American South and from Southern and Eastern Europe, building a population that reached nearly 100,000 by 1950. By 2020, that population had fallen to under 19,000, a collapse of more than 80% across 7 decades. Shops closed, schools consolidated, and each successive census returned a number smaller than the last, as though the county itself were being quietly subtracted from the map. Life expectancy in McDowell County sits nearly a decade below the national average, a figure confirmed without ambiguity in EPA health assessments and county mortality records. Water infrastructure installed during the coal era and never adequately replaced has failed progressively through 40 years of deferred maintenance. Multiple communities have operated under extended boil water advisories in recent years. Beneath the surface, abandoned mine drainage acidifies streams and heavy metals, leach from impoundments into groundwater at sites where reclamation bonds were forfeited by companies that dissolved in bankruptcy before remediation could begin. The debt extracted from McDowell County's mountains across a century of coal production was repaid to shareholders. The debt left in the soil and the water was assigned to 19,000 people with a collapsing tax base and no leverage left to contest it. In first place, Lynch, Kentucky stands not as the worst collapse in this countdown, but as its most precise symbol. U.S. Steel built Lynch in 1917 as the largest company coal town ever constructed in the United States, a planned community of over 10,000 at its peak, with a company hospital, a YMCA, a theater seating 700, and a bathhouse built to receive the men rising from the shafts at the end of each shift. Every structure was designed for permanence. Every brick was laid on the assumption that the company intended to stay. The last mine closed in 1986. The theater still stands. The bathhouse still stands. The company store building still stands, its walls intact in a community of under 700 people. The Southeast Kentucky Cultural Center now operates a heritage museum on the site, employing 12 full-time staff. 12 people tend the monument that once organized 10,000 lives around a single payroll. Lynch was not abandoned through neglect or gradual erosion. It was left with its buildings in place and its population removed, as though the company had concluded the experiment and declined to dismantle the laboratory on its way out the door. Across all 9 towns, the pattern holds without exception. A single industry arrived, extracted everything the mountain and its people could produce, and departed the moment the calculation no longer favored staying. No rescue plan was written, because none was ever required of those who held the capital. The profits left with the companies. The costs in poisoned water, unpaid wages, failed infrastructure, and populations halved and then halved again, were left with the communities. The scars of what was done to Appalachia are not history. They are present tense, still accumulating, and still waiting for a settlement that has never come.